After that meeting, David went home furious. He paced the living room while his wife tried to calm him down. "You can't keep fighting them like this," she said softly. "They would just keep piling on more fines. You will never win." But David shook his head. "There is always a way. I just need to find it." That night, instead of sleeping, he sat at the desk with a cup of coffee and his laptop glowing in the dark. He decided to do what the HOA clearly didn't expect him to do: research. He started by pulling up county property records. Every piece of land had an owner, and David wanted to know exactly who controlled that lake. At first, it was confusing. The neighborhood had been built years ago, and the lake sat right in the middle. Everyone assumed it was common property, something the HOA maintained and regulated. But after digging through several online databases, David noticed something odd. The lot number assigned to the lake wasn't listed under the HOA's name. It wasn't even tied to the neighborhood developer anymore. Instead, it was registered to a private company, one that hadn't done anything with the land in years. David's heart raced. Could it be true? To be sure, he went down to the county clerk's office the next morning. He waited in line, then asked for the full deed records. The clerk handed him a thick folder, and as David flipped through the documents, his suspicion was confirmed. The lake wasn't owned by the HOA. It wasn't theirs to regulate. It was private property. David felt a spark of hope for the first time in weeks. But he wasn't done yet. He wanted to know more about the company that owned the lake, so he called the phone number listed in the records. To his surprise, someone actually picked up. An older man answered. "Yes, we own the parcel. Haven't thought about it in years," the man said. "Maintenance is a pain, and honestly, it's just sitting there costing us taxes every year." David's heart skipped a beat. "Would you consider selling?" he asked carefully. There was a pause on the other side, then a chuckle. "Son, for the right price, I would sell it tomorrow." When David hung up the phone, he felt a surge of adrenaline. The board had humiliated him, mocked him, tried to crush him with fines. But now, he knew something they didn't. They thought they controlled the lake. They thought they could bully him forever. But in reality, the lake could be his. And if he could pull this off, the HOA's power over him would shatter instant. For the first time since the nightmare began, David smiled, because now the fisherman had a plan. David couldn't sleep that night. The thought of owning the lake kept running through his mind. It sounded almost ridiculous. One man buying a lake just to split his HOA. But the more he thought about it, the more sense it made. If he owned it, the HOA couldn't touch him. They couldn't fine him. They couldn't ban him. In fact, he would be the one making the rules. And oh, how sweet that would be. The next morning, David called the company again. This time he spoke more seriously. "Listen," he said. "I live in the neighborhood by the lake. What would it take to make that happen?" The man, on the other hand, didn't hesitate. "Make me an offer." That was the hard part. David had no idea what a lake would cost. 10,000, 50,000, 100. The man laughed when David admitted he wasn't sure. "We wouldn't use that property in decades. It's just been draining money. If you are serious, we will work with you." David hung up and immediately called a real estate lawyer. He explained the situation, and the lawyer nearly choked, laughing. "You want to buy a lake? That's first. But yes, technically it's possible. You would need a contract, a survey, and we would have to transfer the deed. It won't be cheap, but if the owner is eager to sell, you might get a deal." David knew it was a risk. He wasn't a rich man, but he had some savings put away, money he would plan to use for retirement or emergencies. This wasn't exactly what he had in mind. But then again, wasn't this an emergency? The HOA was threatening to ruin him. This was survival. Negotiations stretched on for weeks. The company initially wanted far more than David could afford, but he didn't give up. He explained how the property was barely being used, how maintenance costs were draining them, how no developer would touch it because it was surrounded by residential homes. Finally, after back and forth calls, they agreed on a price. It was still expensive, but just within reach if David pulled together his savings and took a small loan. When he signed the papers, his hands trembled. But when the lawyer slid the deed across the desk and said, "Congratulations, you are the legal owner of the lake," David nearly burst out laughing. He had done it. The very thing the HOA tried to take from him, he now owned outright. That night, David walked down on the water's edge with his fishing rod. For the first time in months, he cast his line into the still water. No fear of fines, no letters, no smug HOA president hovering over him. The lake was his. As the bobber floated peacefully, David whispered to himself, "Try finding me now, Collins." And in that moment, he knew the real fun hadn't even started yet, because soon the HOA was going to find out the truth, and when they did, their little empire was going to crumble. A week later, the HOA scheduled another meeting. David knew it was coming. They were preparing to issue more fines. When he walked into the clubhouse, every board member stared at him like a criminal. The president, Mr. Collins, sneered, "David, we have tailed your violations, fishing on HOA-controlled property, ignoring citations, disrupting community harmony. You now owe $2,300 in fines. Pay within 30 days or we will begin legal action." David let them finish. He sat silently, waiting until the smug looks were at their peak. Then he stood. "Actually," he said, pulling a folded piece of paper from his jacket, "you won't be issuing me any more fines, because as of last week, that lake you keep calling HOA property isn't yours, it's mine." He placed the deed on the table. The room went dead silent. Collins blinked. "This is absurd." "No," David replied calmly. "It belonged to a private company and I bought it, which means I owe the water, the shoreline, everything. You have no jurisdiction there. Not anymore." The treasurer leaned forward, scanning the paperwork. Her face went pale. It was real. The deed was authentic. This can't be legal," she stammered. David smirked. "Check the county records. It's all filled. And since I'm the owner now, I'm setting the rules. Rule number 1, HOA members are banned from using the lake. No fishing, no swimming, no boating, nothing." The room erupted. Board members shouted. Residents gasped. One man in the back even yelled, "You can't do that." David turned toward him. "Actually, I can. Private property rights. And unlike you, I don't issue fake fines. I enforce real ones. Anyone trespassing will be prosecuted." The fury on Colin's face was priceless. He had spent months trying to crush David, and now, with one move, David had crushed him. Over the next few days, chaos spread through the neighborhood. Families who used to picnic by the lake were turned to find new "No trespassing private properties" signs posted everywhere. Teenagers who used to swim there were suddenly banned. Even the HOA itself, which loved to host community fishing days, was cut off completely. Neighbors came knocking on David's door, some angry, some desperate. "Why are you doing this? The lake belongs to all of us," one woman cried. David shook his head. "Where were you when they were fining me for fishing? Not one of you spoke up. You let them bully me. Now it's my turn to set the rules." The HOA board tried to fight back. They threatened lawsuits, sent angry letters, even claimed the purchase was invalid. But every time, David's lawyer shut them down. The law was on his side. And the best part, for the first time ever, Collins was powerless. The man who once lorded over every resident with smug authority now had to walk past the very lake he no longer controlled. David, meanwhile, fished in peace every evening, casting his line with a grin, while HOA members glared from behind the fence. The tables had turned. The fisherman had become the king of the lake. At first, David thought owning the lake would just be about peace, a way to fish without harassment. But the more the HOA pushed, the more he realized this was his chance to turn the tables completely. And so revenge began. The very first weekend after the ban, the HOA had scheduled their annual Summer Lake Festival. It was their biggest event of the year. Food trucks, games, fishing contests, music. But when residents arrived that Saturday morning, they were greeted by a brand new gate, chains across the boat launch, and signs that read in bold red letters, "Private property. Trespassers will be prosecuted." Collins, the HOA president, went red in the face. He stormed up to David, who was calmly sitting in a chair by the shore, fishing rod in hand. "You can't block this event. This is community tradition," he shouted. David didn't even look up. "Correction. It was a tradition. This lake is private now, and you didn't ask permission." Residents murmured in shock. Some of them glared at David, but others smirked. For years, the HOA had bullied them too, and now Collins was finally being humbled. But David wasn't done. The next week, he filed a motion with the county to limit all access roads leading to the lake. The dirt paths residents used for shortcuts closed off. The dock the HOA built with community funds torn down, since it was technically sitting on David's land. When HOA members complained, David shrugged. If you want access, you can apply for a permit, $500 per year. And yes, even you, Mr. Collins. The board was livid. They had spent years acting like royalty, charging residents for every little thing. Now they were the ones being charged, and there was nothing they could do about it. Word spread fast. Some residents secretly applauded David's boldness. Others begged him to reconsider, but David was firm. I didn't start this war, he said in a neighborhood meeting. Your board did. I asked for nothing more than to fish in peace. They chose to humiliate me, fine me, threaten me. Now the lake is mine, and my rules are final. He wasn't bluffing. He hid security cameras around the shoreline, posted warning notices, and even had a lawyer draft official trespass notices for anyone caught sneaking in. Collins tried one last desperate move. The HOA sent a letter for every resident claimed David was abusing his power and urging them to boycott him. David's response, he announced that any resident who wanted to fish in this lake could do so if they paid him directly, not the HOA, $20 for a day pass. Dozens signed up immediately. Within a month, David wasn't just fishing in peace. He was making money from the very people the HOA once ruled over. And Collins, watching kids play and families fish, all under David's rules, not his. The humiliation broke him. One evening, Collins showed up at David's door. His pride finally shattered. Please, he muttered. Can't we make some kind of agreement? The board is furious. The residents are angry. This has gone too far. David looked him in the eye and said the words Collins once used to him. Rules are rules. You should have thought about that before you fined me for fishing. Then he closed the door. And that was the final nail in the coffin. The HOA had gone from being the neighborhood's most feared authority to a powerless committee with no lake, no leverage, and no respect. David had started this fight as just a fisherman, but now he was the man who bought the lake and banned them all. In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood looked different. The once busy lakefront, where HOA banners and festivals used to take place, was now quiet, controlled entirely by David. No more HOA picnics, no more loud meetings at the shore, just the soft sound of water and the occasional splash of fish jumping. For the first time in years, David could cast his line without worrying about fines, threats, or harassment. His weekends were peaceful again, but for the HOA, things only got worse. Without access to the lake, residents began questioning why they were paying such high dues. What were they really getting in return? Complaints piled up, meetings grew heated, and slowly board members resigned one by one. Collins, the once feared president, lost all credibility. Neighbors who once obeyed him now mocked him. The man who fined David for fishing couldn't even step into the water without asking permission. And as for David, he didn't gloat. He didn't rub it in anyone's face. Instead, he focused on what mattered to him: family, peace, and his quiet hobby. Still, the irony wasn't lost on him. The HOA had tried to control one man over something as harmless as fishing. In the end, that one man ended up controlling the very thing they valued most. Looking back, David often told people this wasn't about revenge. It was about standing up for yourself. When someone abuses power, you have two choices: let them walk all over you, or fight back. And sometimes fighting back means being smarter, not louder. The lake, once a symbol of HOA dominance, was now a reminder that no one is untouchable, not even a Homeowners Association. And even time David sat by the water, reeling in a fish, As the sun set, he couldn't help but smile. Because in the end, he didn't just win the right to fish, he won his freedom. And the HOA, well, they never saw it coming.